Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest in our Congressional Conversation series. My name is Akash Chougule. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at Americans for Prosperity.
And I'm Scott Simon, State Director of Louisiana for Americans for Prosperity.
We are super excited about today's conversation, a very special conversation with the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson of the great state of Louisiana. Speaker Johnson, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today. I know our millions of conservative activists across the country are really looking forward to this conversation. It's another busy day. Let me just start here. Are you having fun yet?
Fun. It depends on how you describe it, guys. It's been a whirlwind. I've had the job as Speaker of the House maybe for 40 days or so. All the days kind of run together. In some ways, it feels like 4 years already. There's no downtime in this job. I think it's the first time in the history of the Congress where the speakership changed over midstream, halfway through the Congress. And normally when you become Speaker, you have a long ramp-up period, you hire all your 100-member staff, and you get everything organized. And we had to sort of do it overnight. And so we were building the plane as we've flown it for the first 5 weeks or so. Really, truly, there's been just a couple of moments of downtime through that whole period. But it's been great, very productive, lots of great things going on here. I think the dust is going to settle soon, and maybe we'll have fun in the first part of the next year.
Mr. Speaker, we've had the pleasure of knowing each other for a few years now, going back to our time in the Louisiana legislature. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your roots back in the Bayou State.
Sure. Scott, it was a great pleasure to serve with you in the legislature. I miss those days. They were simpler times. I grew up in northwest Louisiana in a town called Shreveport. I'm the son of a firefighter. My dad, when I was 12 years old, was permanently disabled and critically burned in a line of duty in an explosion on the job. And that was in 1984. I was the oldest of 4 kids. I said in my speech before I took the gavel that my highest aspiration in life was to be the chief of the Shreveport Fire Department when I grew up, because we grew up literally across the street from the Fire and Police Training Academy, and I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. I still do. But when my father got burned, it changed the trajectory of our lives. I was the oldest of 4 kids, and we all were sort of urged to go to school and do other things. And so I wound up graduating from LSU and then the LSU Law School. I was a religious liberty litigator for about 20 years. And then sometime around 2015, our sitting state representative called me and said, I'm going to run for judge. It was Jeff Thompson, a friend of yours, another conservative. And he said, you ought to run in the district. And so Kelly and I prayed about it, decided we should do it. So I wound up running unopposed in that one, and served in the legislature for about 1.5 years. And then my predecessor, John Fleming, called me, Congressman Fleming, and said, I'm going to run for Senate. You ought to run for Congress. And so we prayed about it again, and that's how we wound up here. So that was 4 terms ago, about 7 years ago. And being Speaker of the House is not anything I ever aspired to or thought would be possible, but here we are.
What's one thing people in Washington might want to know about you?
Well, that we believe in the cause. I mean, I've dedicated my life to that. Kelly and I have 4 children of our own, 5 when you count our 40-year-old son that we took in when he was a teenager. I'm deeply concerned about the country that they're going to inherit. And I didn't run for Congress because I wanted a title. This is not important to me. What's important is maintaining this constitutional republic that we have. It's still an experiment on the world stage. We're only 247 years into this. We don't know how long it's going to last, and we're facing serious headwinds right now, real challenges to the foundations of the country. And I have a huge toolbox of totally unmarketable skills, guys. But they happen to come in handy right now. The background in constitutional law is really important and has been helpful here. The legal background and the interest I have in policy, and so trying to pull all that together and put it to use for the cause and the country and try to save the republic. It sounds like a bumper sticker slogan, but that's really what's at stake right now, and that's why we're here, and that's why I'm fighting every day.
So as the largest conservative grassroots organization in the country, Speaker, we've talked to more than 6 million people this year on the phones and at their front doors. As you know, the number one issue we hear over and over and over again that they're most concerned about is the economy. Broadly speaking, what is your vision for the economy and the role of government in it?
Well, we need less government. I mean, I'm from the Reagan school. We grew up in the 80s, and he said government's not the solution to the problem, government is the problem. We need less government in our lives, less government intervention. The current team in charge, the Biden administration and the Senate Democrats who run the Senate, the majority there, they believe truly that we ought to grow and expand the state and their statists in that regard. And that's a tremendous affront to the preservation of our liberty. It makes life more difficult. They want more regulation. They want higher taxation. They want to gather more resources and collect them in the power centers, a highly centralized federal government. That does not serve the people well. It does not help us preserve our freedom. And it ultimately leads to less liberty and opportunity and security for more people. And so we believe in the opposite of those things. And I think we would do well to return to those principles. I think we're going to have an opportunity in this upcoming election cycle. Because right now we have a very clear distinction, a very clear contrast between these two governing philosophies, worldviews, if you will. The left, the Democrats, the progressives, they want government to intervene in every aspect of your life. And we want to get government out of your life. And I think the two results of those two different philosophies is really clear to see, the difference between what those two things yield. I think the people are beginning to see that in spades, and I think it's going to inure to our benefit.
How do you explain it to the average American why Bidenomics hasn't worked?
Well, one indicator is that they don't use the phrase anymore. I think it's been a few weeks since any of the Democrats or the president himself have uttered the term, because now people know what that means. I mean, it really has been the reason that the cost of living is so high that you can't afford to put gasoline in your pickup truck, and that your liberty and your opportunity are being reduced. It's part of the reason that we have even increasing crime rates because of the way they've handled the economy. The Democrats in Washington have spent $4 trillion just over the last couple of years added. We're having debates, even as we speak today, about more supplemental spending that the White House wants to impose on the American taxpayer without any payoffs and no pay-fors for that. We're having a real struggle right now about changing the way Washington works and thinks about spending. But it's Bidenomics and the reckless spending that has gotten us into the situation we're in. Some of my colleagues subscribe to modern monetary theory, which is unicorn fantasy economics that they were arguing a couple of years ago that there's no limit to what the United States government can spend. They quite literally said, because we own the printing presses. Well, how's that going to work out? We said, what about inflation? Oh, that's not a real concern. Well, we see where that's gotten us. So they're not espousing some of those views as loudly as they were a couple of years ago now, because interest rates are rising and it's crushing hardworking families. But that's what Bidenomics has wrought, and we're going to remind the voters of that going into the next election cycle. What
do our nation founding principles mean to you, and how can we reaffirm them and the importance of our children and our grandchildren?
Scott, it's a great question. I quote Reagan all the time. It's not intentional. It's just I think of it because he had a way of articulating this very well. In his farewell address, he said famously, they called me the great communicator, but I really wasn't that. And I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, I was just communicating great things, and they're the same great things that have guided our nation since its founding. Today, all of us, are stewards of those great things. And what are they? I call them the 7 core principles of American conservatism, but you could say, really, these are the 7 core principles of the country itself. It's individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. Under each of those, there are lots of subcategories, and we could unpack it for hours today, the 3 of us talking about that. But those are the essential foundations of the country. Those are the things that we must preserve. Those things are the keys to what made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. It's not even close. We're the strongest, most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation in the history of mankind, and the reason for that is because we were built on these sound foundations. But what's happening right now is you have a growing element of people who don't understand that. You have a growing number of elected officials, even in the United States Congress, that have disdain for those principles, and they want to tear down the foundations and replace it with something else. They want to turn us into some sort of European-style socialist, utopia, and we all know that's a fool's errand. It's a dangerous thing, because you sacrifice your liberty in the process. So that's the fight here. I mean, when it boils down to it, we had lots of skirmishes on policy and individual pieces of legislation, but at the end of the day, we're fighting to preserve those core principles, and I think we've got to speak with clarity and conviction and consistency about that to let more of the American people understand those foundations.
Those principles have facilitated what many of us endearingly call the American dream.
Right.
What does the American dream mean to you?
At its essence, the American dream is, I think it's real simple. If you're willing to work hard and play by the rules, you can make a better life for yourself and your children. I mean, that's what's defined us as a country. And the problem is right now, the American dream has been pulled further beyond the grasp of more people because they're being crushed by inflation. They're being crushed by government regulation and taxation and all the things that we abhor. And so it's made it harder and harder for people to sort of broaden that pathway out of poverty and make it up to the next rung on the ladder. And so the American dream to many people, it seems like just that, and it's something it's not achievable. It's a dream beyond their grasp. We have to bring it back within their grasp. And I think we have the answers to all the challenges facing us, the answers that will make that possible for more people. And it's something definitely worth fighting for and preserving.
Well, what do you see as the importance of grassroots organizations like Americans for Prosperity in the pursuit of that goal of growing the conservative movement? And how and why can AFP be helpful in this cause?
Yeah, look, I'll say this. I'm a big fan of AFP. I think it's, and I've said this many times over the years, that's one of the most effective organizations I've ever seen at doing this exact thing. And that is to, you do a number of things really well. It's voter education. I mean, it's critically important right now. The founder said, and Reagan said again, he said, we want an informed patriotism, and AFP does an extraordinary job with that. It's about voter education, it's about voter turnout, it's about mobilizing people at the time when it's critical to get that done. And also, part of that education of voters is holding elected officials accountable and letting constituents know how their elected officials are voting and how they're leading. And that can be a very, very effective tool at a time like this. The use of social media, the use of all the media outlets that we have. Mail pieces, AFP's had some of the most effective mail pieces I've ever seen. I mean, we've had lawmakers do a 180 on their positions because they were called out. They would say one thing during an election cycle and then act differently. And I think that is a really, really critical part of a role that needs to be played in the upcoming election cycle in particular.
Mr. Speaker, in recent years, some in our own party have called for the right to abandon that commitment to free markets and limited government. They say that those ideas have actually failed to improve the well-being of families and communities. What is your opinion of this movement? Do free markets and limited government still work to improve people's lives, or do conservatives need to embrace bigger government?
Listen, we're bullish and insistent on free markets and limited government. And we have a recent case study. I mean, if you look at right before COVID hit, the first couple of years of the Trump administration, we had achieved the greatest economy in the history of the world, not just the United States. Every single demographic, everybody was doing better. All boats are rising. And the reason is because we doubled down on those principles. We reduced regulations. We had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We unburdened the free market and those who are the job producers, the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, and we allowed them to flourish. And so everyone did better. Then the Biden administration comes in and they turn the dial exactly back the other direction, and they double down on taxation, regulation, big government as a solution to everything. And so we have to defend those principles. Now, there is a difference between supporting the free market and opposing some of these big woke corporations and their radical agendas, where they're using this for social experimentation and forcing ideology on people. You'll see a lot of conservatives now having a backlash against that kind of movement in corporate America. But that doesn't mean the government should go in and regulate. It means that the market should work those things out. And if allowed that opportunity, it will work out. The American people are not in favor of that nonsense. And you've seen boycotts and you've seen changes in market share and corporations that have gone too far down that road. And that's the beauty of our system, that consumers can move with their feet, the market can adjust, but the government's in the middle of it and impedes all of that. And so we just got to get back to the fundamentals. I think they still work.
How do we talk to the whole country, including those who may disagree with us or are unsure about the conservative belief system, and how do we grow the conservative movement?
I think we've got to, again, just speak with clarity, conviction, consistency about these core principles we're talking about today and why that's good for everyone. Tone is important right now. The message is important, but the way you deliver it is critically important as well. People need to know that we understand where they're coming from. We understand the struggles they're facing. One thing about the first Trump presidency is he brought into our tent more blue-collar workers, more hardworking families who had traditionally always voted Democrat. But they looked and they saw that what President Trump was talking about, what the House and Senate Republicans were talking about, was good for them and their families, for their safety and security and all of those things. And so when we speak to swing voters, when we speak to people in the suburbs, the message really isn't all that different wherever you are. It's that you talk about how those principles are good for everybody. I genuinely believe that our conservative philosophy and our principles are the things that will lead to greater human flourishing. ultimately that's the objective. And we can see now, because we have objective data, that the other worldview doesn't lead us there. So that's the contrast we have to explain in simple terms. And we're encouraging our candidates and our challengers to some of these open seats in Congress to take every town hall opportunity you can, every candidate forum, and just speak from the heart. And that's what people want to hear, and that's what they want to see.
Whenever your time as speaker is through, what do you want to have accomplished, and what do you want the country to believe about Mike Johnson and the House Republican Conference that he led?
It's a good question. To me, it's about restoring faith ultimately in this institution. You know, right now, the people's faith in Congress is right about somewhere on the scale with pancreatic cancer. I mean, in favorability, right? I mean, that's not much of an exaggeration. We have to do better. And the reason they don't believe in the institution is because they've seen people failing here. They've seen a lack of trust and transparency. That's what I'm trying to bring back from the Speaker's office on down. We're trying to decentralize the power of the Speaker's office, make it a more member-driven and organic kind of decision-making process, empowering the chairman here of these committees of jurisdiction because they're the subject matter experts. Some of that's inside the building, but if we do that well, we can demonstrate that we can govern well, and that will ultimately restore trust. At the end of the day, I want them to say, and I hope it will be true at the end, that, you know, Johnson, for all of his misgivings, he restored honesty and trust to that center of power. And I think that's really, really important, that the people in a constitutional republic, in a government of, by, and for the people, trust their institutions. And right now, we've got a lot of work to do in that regard.
Absolutely. Quick rapid fire.
Rapid fire. Your favorite food?
Oh, that's a tough one, Scott. Something Italian, chicken parmesan, probably.
Favorite football team?
LSU, not even close.
All right. Favorite holiday tradition?
Christmas. We've got a big family. Family's a big thing in Louisiana. We all have big families, and we gather them all together, and we have lots of traditions related to that. My favorite is the white elephant gift exchange. When you get about 40 family members around, it's a lot of fun.
Do you have a New Year's resolution yet?
Grow the majority in the House. It's easy.
There you go. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today, for your partnership with us at Americans for Prosperity, most importantly, for your principled conservative leadership. We are grateful for what you're doing here, grateful for your time, and looking forward to working with you and your phenomenal staff.
Thank you so much. Next time you visit with me, I'll have a little more sleep, and I won't look so haggard.
I never do.
Looking good.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.